Audience, as I mentioned, but my name's Jeff Bentley, Research in Motion. So this presentation is really focused more on what the platform brings and how to leverage it for your application, making the assumption that you've already gone through, chosen your platform of choice or your discipline to develop with, and then how you get it within the environment and how you can manage it. That's really the purpose of this. So either of you two gentlemen ever worked with, seen, or experienced a BlackBerry Enterprise Server? Okay, so I will talk about, basically three typical questions that a developer comes up with, when they're walking through. A couple acronyms and terms. Talk about some architecture. So what we've got as far as the three platforms, BES, the current infrastructure, BDS, or BlackBerry device, and I'll get into those. I'll talk about some benefits that we provide as part of that platform and the capabilities. Then I'll talk about your deployment options with the platform as well, what you can do to deploy it, and then ultimately as a developer, what you need to do. To be honest with you, what you as a developer would really need to do is one slide that's at the end, but I bring you all the way through so you know what's going to happen to when you do the handoff. So, what do I do? I've written this app. It's pretty cool. How do I get it deployed? I kind of know what I need to do in the public if I was using maybe either AppWorld or one of the other stores, but what do I do internally? I can't just put this somewhere and say, please come and get it. So what are my options? What does the company use? Who do I talk to, that type of thing? And then ultimately, is there anything that the platform could do to maybe differentiate my application? Could I do something a little more with it, leveraging what the capabilities are of the platform? So with that, MDM, Mobile Device Management, so that's something that BlackBerry's done very well since 1998. The capabilities there with our BlackBerry devices, being able to manage them, deploy software to them, put policies and so on. We've really been a pioneer and a leader in that. We kind of started that piece. So that's a big player for us. MobileFusion, which is really an all-encompassing component suite of applications or products. So one of them is BES, which is probably the term I'll use the most here. That's our BlackBerry Enterprise Server. That's the legacy system that's been around since 1999, managing all of the devices. Then we have BDS, which is BlackBerry Device Service. That's the ones that manage the playbooks today and will manage the BlackBerry 10 devices come the beginning of 2013. There was a huge shift there to get from BES to BDS because we went from supporting Java devices and having all the security and the stacks that we were well known for, and coming out with QNX as the operating system for the playbook. That didn't work natively with BES, so we came out with BDS to put all those pieces together with respect to the security, the connectivity, all of those things, and then ultimately into BlackBerry 10. And then BlackBerry 10 will actually come back onto the existing playbooks after we get BlackBerry 10 devices out in the market. So then everything will run BlackBerry 10 from here on out. Universal Device Service, so this is our foray into mobile device management for other devices, iOS and Android. It was a company we acquired called Ubitex out of Germany, and then we've taken it and added on our capabilities that we're known for as far as having the manageability and such. Obviously we are limited to some things, and I'll speak to it as well. Fusion, that's the single pane of glass that allows you to look at all the components within those three pieces and manage the users from that single console. And then BlackBerry Balance. So it was spoken about this morning in the keynotes as far as the differentiator of how things work. I'll speak a little more about that. So, it's a single platform. Really, it's our next generation of MDM, what MobileFusion is. So it allows us to manage all of the devices that I'd spoken about just, when I was kind of going through the terms. So our smartphones, our playbook, our BlackBerry 10, iOS and Android devices, giving you the capability of being able to kind of one-stop shop to manage those things and have access to deploying applications as well in the same concepts as what you'd be used to doing today with a BlackBerry Enterprise Server, taking those and moving forward. Simplified management through the use of, kind of one platform, so to speak, even though it's three pieces. We will be announcing something coming up in, I think, the February timeframe. It was briefly talked about during the keynote called BlackBerry Enterprise Service, but nobody kind of delved further in it, so look for some more things on that. That will be officially a product by our BlackBerry World next May. There'll be some beta tests coming out, I think it's January or so, for that sort of thing, but it's basically kind of the next evolution of all of these. And we're getting ready to start talking about that and more. So, and then a single console. So think of it as a single pane of glass, the ability to go to one console to manage users. So if I'm looking for Jeff, I can simply go, I query Jeff, either email address, name, whatever. I'll get back all his devices. If I have all of the pieces in there, and it could be I've got a BlackBerry, I've got a playbook, and I have maybe an iOS device as well. and then I can manage them from that one place. Currently today, all of those pieces, BES, BDS, and UDS, require their own individual administrative consoles for doing server work. So if I want to add a server, configure a server, add users at a low level through bulk loading and so on, if I want to create policies, if I wish to create software configurations, I have to use those individual consoles. This Fusion console today is just for user administration, and we're slowly evolving that. So with that said, this is BES as it stands today and has since 1999. So think of it from, and let's see if this is going to work. You really can't see it, but think of it here as your enterprise behind the firewall all the way out to the device. So with BES, you have the capability of either using triple DES or AES 256-bit encryption to allow the connection between the device and back down to your environment. But it's basically an always-on, always-connected, bidirectional VPN. So you as a developer, think of it as in those terms. So there's nothing you need to do when you want to make a call, HTTP, HTTPS, any call from, from your device out here to your back-end servers here, that's just provided for you. That's one of the benefits of the platform. So the current BES, which again has been around for almost forever, relies on that as its stack. It's an outbound initiated port call on 3101, so you're not coming back through it. So that's the security stack on it. And we certainly could take 2 hours and just delve into just that as far as it's concerned. But think of it as nothing more as a developer. From the upper right, I make a call. I know I'm getting to something behind the firewall. I don't have to add anything. I can add a simple call, an API, to see if I have coverage. That coverage could be Wi-Fi. It could be cell. I can test to see what level of coverage I have, not strength, but the level, and make my appropriate, I guess I'll call it calls within my program to say either, yeah, I'm moving a large file, so I only want to do that if I've got Wi-Fi, or 3G, 4G is good enough, or whatever. You've got the capability. Or I have no coverage. Well, to the user, I'll let the application go away, but it's still running until I can actually move data back and forth. But that's the power of the platform. BDS, it's a little more simplistic, but it's really just the next evolution or an extension of BES. So from over here, again, your application servers in your email, your firewall, the equivalent of a BES server, out through that outbound port 3101 to my devices. Currently today, it's a BlackBerry, and it will be it's a Playbook, and a BlackBerry 10 come in the new year. And you've got the same capabilities going back and forth. So it's an always-on, always-connected, bidirectional VPN. Yes? It is. It's the same premise, but it is separate. Yes, I'm sorry. I'm just using BES as kind of the baseline because that was what worked very well. So we really took that and all of its fundamentals and made BDS, or part of MobileFusion. BDS is a part of MobileFusion, so is BES. I just put this up here. It's the all-encompassing piece. And then it's the same thing back and forth as if it was a BES. Right? But BES only supports a Java-based operating system as far as the device. BDS supports QNX and BlackBerry 10, and that's been our evolution. And then the email piece in here, which is different. We're using ActiveSync instead of MAPI, or in the case of Domino, using straight comm calls back into the database and stuff. But this is now using ActiveSync. So you'll notice that the BES equivalent, or BDS, is not in the way. It's not the one polling and checking for mail. We've gone to what Microsoft's standard is the device, once the port's been opened, it's going to go back and do ActiveSync calls to go get the mail. Whereas in the past, you had your BlackBerry server here peeking through your mail, looking for, is there something new for Jeff? I'll do a push, and I'll send it out the door for him. And then the device had the email client waiting there for him to say, hey, is there something new? Great, notify me that there's something here. So a little different, for BDS than it is for BES. Okay? So this is a very simplistic version of UDS. I could have put the other one up, but even though my lines are squiggly and colored, it was much more convoluted. But the premise is still the same. You have UDS, or Universal Device Service, which is part of the MobileFusion suite of products. It is not in the path for your email. So much like BDS, it's not in there. So UDS does not provide email or calendaring or PIM. Its purpose is just to do device management. So we will talk out to these push capabilities on these two platforms, one for the Android, one for iOS. There's a small client that's installed on the devices. You go to the appropriate store to download it and put it on there. It becomes its version, so now we can manage using the 50 or 60 policies that are available on those platforms to wipe a device, lock it, check for jailbreak, all of those types of things. And then our UDS is able to talk through the APNS for Apple and Android's capable push network as well. They communicate back and forth, and the client talks back through the outbound initiated port, only for device management. So something we have spoken about and announced, which is a container solution, where there'll be the equivalent on these devices, where you'll be able to get your email and so on in a secure manner. You'll also be able to put your applications in there that are deemed enterprise. They'll be completely distinct and separate from your personal applications that I might go to the App Store, or I might go to the App Market in the Android case and download. So, yes? No, no. So we're not delivering anything. From UDS, we deliver nothing to the client. All we're doing is managing the device. So when you hook, I'll use an iOS device as an example. When you hook that up to ActiveSync and you've opened up the appropriate ports on your firewall and you're communicating back, right? Without UDS, ActiveSync has its own set of policies with which to manage those devices. Those policies are sent to the device to say, you know, potentially there's something encrypted, you can do this. I think there's about 50 or 60 that are supported. The minute you connect that device through UDS, those ActiveSync policies are no longer supported. They can be sent, but they're ignored by virtue of the client that gets installed, so this little thing here that we've developed. Where we're going is with that container and the bidirectional communication that we have for both BlackBerry 10 devices and Java devices, then you'll get your encryption and your VPN all the way through. And we've announced that. We haven't just announced a date with which we'll deliver yet. It will be in 2013. So we're moving rapidly towards that to provide it. Oh, yeah. Yeah, big time. Yeah. So that was the one thing that, you know, the enterprise clients kept asking us for is, well, this is great. Can you help me out with these other devices? You know, give me something. And while good technology is good, and it gives the people the capability for a container, it doesn't give them that, you know, always on, always connected, bidirectional VPN. And that's what everybody really likes from a development perspective, and immediate access to your intranet. So that's something we are definitely working towards. As a next evolutionary step to UDS, so once we plug all these three things together, you can kind of see I need a server for this, and a server for this, and a server for this. So we've heard that, and we've talked about it, and it was mentioned in the keynote, the BlackBerry Enterprise Service instead of server, keeping in theme with the old terminology BES. We're moving towards kind of a consolidation of those, and there'll be more announcements as we move forward, but it's just kind of been high level spoke about. But we do have on the roadmap definitely a container and definitely the connection to give you that capability. So with UDS, you can put your supported policies out there to wipe the device, to detect if it's jailbroken, as well as, because we've been one of the good players, or probably the player in it, you can also manage your applications as well. So in UDS, I'll back up one step. In this BES, you create something called a software configuration, and I'll speak about that briefly, or not briefly, and more in a minute. So you create a software configuration for deployment in the BlackBerry Enterprise. You create a software configuration in this. You create a software catalog in the UDS. It's a different terminology, where you can do some certain things with BES and BDS. We are somewhat limited based on protocols and supported policies with those other devices. So here it's more of a pull than a push, and I'll speak certainly to that in a managed in just a second or two. But that really differentiates, or delineates, I guess a better word, of the three platforms that comprise Fusion and the capabilities and kind of where we're going with the roadmap. Yes? Can I? I don't delve into those, to be honest with you. I certainly can if you want to delve into them here. Yeah, so right here, yeah. Yes? So let me back up here. So on BES, you have about 600 IT policies that are capable of managing the device down to a brick. So I can't do anything with it, right? Which usually leads the person to say, well, I'm going to go buy something else that I know I can go download some things on or whatever, right? When you get to BDS, we've limited that substantially, and a lot of that is due to balance. So the paradigm of you needed to lock it down, we've already kind of done that for you with balance and capabilities. So the policies that you're referring to put out there to say, hey, you're connected and you can do X and you can do that, there aren't too many of them that you can do in there that would restrict access to what an app has. What you could do, though, is in your current BlackBerry infrastructure is, as my device application is communicating back through here, your application server would only allow traffic to come from a BES. So it's not dictating that this device, it's where it came from internal, I guess would be the way to do it. Yeah. Oh, okay, great. So regardless of whether it's this or this, your application, you're just doing a straight HTTP request. So in your app, you would have, the server / web service / method as an example, and a query string if that's what it needed in order to get the data. And that's all you're doing. And by virtue of this thing always being connected, it knows how to use that pipe to come back through to get to your app server. Mm-hmm. Right. Got it. Dynamically. Got it. Okay. Sorry, I didn't know you were using that. Okay. And then it's resolving it for you. Yes. Okay. So you'll be able to do the same thing within BDS. Yes. Yeah. Of BDS? Yeah. Now, do you have a BDS server? You do. And that's not there? Okay. So we'll need to get someone, or if not, I'll reach out to one of the TAMs that's very well versed in this sort of thing. So let's hook up after we're done here. If that's okay? Yeah. Because what we were intending to do as far as the policy reduction was getting rid of the ones that really caused it to be a brick per se, where balance was going to achieve the same purpose, so that, quite honestly, we weren't losing some of the battle due to, a consumer looking at it going, well, I want that because I can do more with it. It's not that you can't do things with these. Granted, if you got a really old device, some of them wouldn't do things, right? But the newer devices are more than capable of doing things. So, but let's definitely hook up afterwards, okay? I just don't have the answer on that one of which policy it is. So, and then the intent is in here, the same thing will take effect. So when we get the actual connection and all of those things, so where it's a, always on, always connected between here and here and then back out to your app server, once we get to there with that container and then the connection, the same thing will apply. We're obviously limited to the 50 or 60 policies that ActiveSync and those two devices support for ActiveSync. We're only as good as those APIs. So push, are you familiar with BlackBerry push capability? Right. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this one other than your app server makes a call to the BES. The BES does a lookup in its database, detects that the user exists, responds with a 200 to your application to say, great, yeah, thanks, have a nice day. It's now a store and forward. It goes out to the device. In theory, I'm done, unless I would like to have a confirmation come back. It's one of the headers. It's going to come back to your application, and the round robin is complete. So you know it actually not only got delivered to BES, it actually made it to the device and the application itself. So if you're very familiar with push, that's obviously a platform benefit that we provide. And then you can also expand the headers. So if you've ever gone in and looked at the push capabilities, you can do a lot with the headers as far as changing the default time in here, how long BES will keep it, how long you want it before it throws it away, whether you want a receipt back on it, all sorts of things, that you want to do. So this flows from BES to BDS. It's a little different in BDS. It's what we call a poke and pull instead of a push. You can shove up to 8K using a push on BDS. After that, in theory, you need to provide a URL for the device to say, I want the rest of it. It's just a little different mantra that we've chosen in BDS for BlackBerry 10 devices. and ultimately the playbook. So that's something even myself going out and talking to enterprises, I've got to kind of grasp my head around or my arms around it while I go out and say, well, hey, we built these HTTP components and pushing and whatever else, shoving all those images just isn't going to work anymore, right? You can maybe shove the URL to say, hey, wake up, there's something for you, now go get it, right? So now you've got to have more of the web services on the back end to be able to retrieve it. So it's just something that we did as an architectural change. So balance, it was spoken about, this would be kind of a different way of looking at it. So think of the middle as here's your BlackBerry experience for you, the user, leveraging these tool sets. And here's your enterprise side or your work, and here's your user side, and never the twain shall meet. So you can't take something from the enterprise side and copy it into your personal. You can't forward to your personal mail. You can't use it, so you can set up all sorts of policies as a company to prevent that. So this is what takes the place of a lot of those IT policies that we had out there so that you could yes, no, lock it down, can't do, that type of thing. Balance really takes that away. And you saw the demonstrations today of, okay, I go into my work side, I go into this side, and the two look completely different. And I can do certain things here and I can't over here, but I've got the full capability as a user when I'm out and I want to play around and I want to load this game and I want to look at this. I'm not restricted by all the IT policies it used to be that I got this cool device and I can't do anything with it. So that really is a high level for balance. So our development options, not sure how far any of you four gentlemen have gone, but this isn't a wiring diagram of an F-150 pickup truck, although it somewhat looks like it. So ultimately, we started with Java. So originally we were a C++ development shop. So our early OSs back in 98 through 2001 were C++, and we actually allowed people to OEM the operating system and use it in other places. And in 2002 we said no, and we went to the Java-based device model. So I don't have anything that kind of precedes it to the left, but Java obviously, and using your designer and your assets, you build something, it's deployable on a device. Web, using HTML5 and what we call WebWorks as our framework, which is really nothing more than an SDK to allow you to build and deploy, allows you to take that and come down and go either way. So that's kind of your transition, if you like, from current devices into the new, if you like, as a model. And then Flash and Air was our first kind of kick at the can when we come out with our playbook. That was the first model that you could do. And then we did WebWorks as I worked through the succession of, I guess I would call it playbook announcements back in the fall of 2010. And then we moved into announcing that we would support Android, but it wasn't there day one. Day one of the playbook was Flash and Air and Web, being able to take your HTML5 assets and build an application. Then we added Android in the 2.0 release of the operating system using I think it's a Delvik runtime is what we've put out there. And I believe it's a 2.3 release open source of the Android player, if I'm not mistaken. And then that allowed you to take your APK file, completely package it in less than 5 minutes, and it's what we call a bar file or a .bar extension, which is really a Flash and Air application, and install it on the device. So today you would need to sideload it or use an OTA or an over-the-air, or if you have BDS, be able to install it that way. And then we came along with BlackBerry 10 and said, okay, great, here comes our native capabilities. And there's really two flavors in there, and they spoke about it today. One of them is Cascades for your UI and using C++, and the other is Qt or Qt. So I consider them both in the native side of it. And then obviously those three come down and come to the right side of that equation, which is I'm going to support the playbook, and I'm going to support the BB10 device. Ultimately, as I mentioned earlier, the BlackBerry playbook, we have said we will port BB10 back. I just don't have a date on that as of yet. That will be after the BB10 devices are out. But then it'll be one platform going forward. Yes. Yep. It refused the bar file? Okay, so we need to get offline with that one as well. So I know that one definitely works. So anybody that I've seen gone through, or go through this, it's been like 2 to 5 minutes max to convert it into the bar file. And then they simply either use the USB if they want to do it for some of their dev testing and sideload it, or they've given it off to their administrator and said, hey, put this out on my device. It shouldn't know any difference whether it came from here or came from here, because quite honestly, when you're done with the web, it's also a bar file. So when you use our WebWorks SDK and you take your assets and you package it, it becomes a bar file as well. So the actual BDS should know no difference. So now it could be, though, that potentially there's something here that we don't support. So there's some APIs, obviously, from Android that are unique to them. If you're accessing the PIM, the calendar, the email, we don't support those, the same as you can't have access today to ours like you can on a BlackBerry device. So there are some things. If it's a standalone app, it works great. We found that probably 95% of, like, standalone games and stuff like that, you can take, package, and they just work. So, and there's quite a number of them out there in App World to be able to download. So. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So, have you done much in the side loading, or? Yeah. Okay. All right. I know there has been some talk of, how we want to continue that, or will we continue that, or is it a development tool? I have no idea, because there's been stuff on the blogs as to, well, RIM's going to lock this down, or, because RIM's going to do this. I have no idea what our plans are yet for that. So I know it'd make it very difficult for me for my testing of, okay, I got this thing, how do I put it on here? Right? I can't keep handing it to someone to give it back to me. So, but then how do you stop that from, there was one site of people sharing bar files. So the proliferation of, not freeware, but basically I bought this, but I'm giving it to all my friends. So I know we had some incidents where our legal folks were out there trying to shut those sites down. So how we do that, whether it's you got to sign up for us for a debug token, and that's the only way you can get it on. Or, so we're still working through some things on that. So I just hope it doesn't make it cumbersome, because then we lose traction. So from a deployment perspective, today we have 4 methods. So we have App World, which is really your consumer-facing, that type of thing, public interface to download applications using the App World application that's installed on the device. But that's not really suited for an enterprise, right? I've got something that's unique to me. I'm not putting it out on App World so my internal customers go out, download it, and get it that way. Some companies have done it. Maybe it's just some HR app and the actual ports and so on are already external facing anyway, so they've been punched through the firewall. Most companies, like a bank or so on, you're not going to find their internal applications out here. Just that's not happening, right? We saw some of the stuff in the keynote as far as the integration of App World to within BB10 and ultimately Playbook and how it plays and so on. And I'll speak to some of those things in a minute. In the middle, we really have 2, and I've come up with the best way I could. They're really only for BlackBerry today, a Java-based device. So we have OTA, which stands for over the air, and that allows you to take your installation files and put them on a web server somewhere, send someone the URL, and they'll use their device browser to install them. So with a BlackBerry application, you have your what we call our COD files or .cod files, and you either have an application descriptor file or a Java descriptor file, either a .jad or a .alx. You simply use the .jad file as the driver that tells the device, once you've hit it with your device browser, what version is supported, what pieces of the COD files I need, any dependencies, all of those things. And you simply just put it on a server, give the person the URL, they open it with their BlackBerry browser, and they can install it. The other option is obviously sideload via USB, which you're used to doing for testing and so on. That there obviously is getting more and more restricted, as I mentioned in the previous slide. We're trying to kind of bring that back. It's not really of value to an enterprise. It's very cumbersome. That was the first foray for the Playbook. Before we had BDS, was people bought Playbooks and said, how do I get apps on these? Well, guess what? You got to do it via USB, and you've got to sideload it. That just doesn't scale, right? For what people need to do there. So, and then we have managed. So managed is the 3 components I spoke about earlier through MobileFusion. So we have BlackBerry Enterprise Server, BlackBerry Device Service, and Universal Device Service. So those capabilities there give you the power and such to actually get applications on the device. BES and BDS give you the capability to push. So I can dictate as an enterprise what gets on your device from an internal perspective. I can make it mandatory that you can't delete it. I can also set up such that what are called software configurations, so that you as a user would get these 5 or 10 because you're in these groups, And should you upgrade your device, BES and BDS are intelligent enough to notice, wait a second, you don't have these apps anymore. I'll push them out for you. So you don't have to leave the onus on the user to say, hey, we have these 8 or 9, kind of corporate apps that we really want you to have. Maybe some are mandatory, maybe they're not, but if we detect they're not, we'll try and put them on for you. So that's what that manageability gives you on the BES and the BDS side. So you simply create the package, you set it up for who gets it. That can either be at an individual level or it can be at a group. You can put a whole bunch of users within there. You can set dependencies that this app can't go on until application A is already there, or this app can only support this device, or this app has to have version X of something else. That's the capability built into these two. UDS, that's a little different animal. It's a pull. So the user needs to go in and see what they have in that client that gets installed on the device, and then they make a request. So there's not a push model like BES and BDS because they don't support it. It is a pull. Now, there are some nag messages in this side that you can set up with policies that say application X is a mandatory app. I'll allow them 3 nag messages, and after that I'm going to do something. And by do something, you can wipe their device, you can untrust it, and you can simply unmanage it. So those are your 3 options as a policy. So you could say you've got to have this sales application. And here's your nag, and here's your nag, and here's your nag. Well, look, you're not really doing this. Now, would someone go as drastic as wiping? Probably not. But those are the 3 capabilities you have in there. But there's no way to forcefully put an app on there because the APIs on those devices don't support that. So it is a pull. Okay? So I want to make that kind of clear. That's a differentiator. Yes? I'm sorry, what? You mean the polling on the client? Yeah, that is configurable within the client. Yeah. So what we've done in here on that little app that you go either to the App Store or the App Market to download on the device, the user has some settings in there as far as what they want as to, well, how much do I want this thing to go after? How often do I want it to connect? I don't want it to drain my battery, do it every minute. There are some configurations. There are also some configurations from, I'll call it the UDS side, that can be pushed to that application. Yes, you, the user, would know that, hey, you're supposed to do this. It wouldn't just be an ignore. So from the app, when it connects back through, it's going to look into UDS to say, is there anything for me, however me is defined, whether I'm in a group or an individual? There'll be notifications to come back to say, yeah, you've got these 3 applications. This one's mandatory, and these 2 are kind of optional. One might be an expense management, and something might be travel, right? You choose what you want, but this one's mandatory. They may or may not know that mandatory means I need to go get it, but they'll get reminded. And then, the person who's set up UDS, they're probably not going to wipe your device, but they may have it that you get 5 or 3 or 2 or whatever that number is. And then they can choose to take no action as well. And then you might show up on a report that says, hey, Jeff didn't update or install that app. You'll get notified, but you still need to make the request. You physically have to go into that client. You physically have to request the application. Yeah, so that's a good question. So I'm not sure, I'd be honest with you, whether I was going to get to that in another slide, but I'll hit it here. So when you set up BES, you have to have all the files. So all the COD files and whatever descriptor file that you want to use. So if it's a third-party app, you have to go to that third party and say, can I have the installation files? So that becomes, quite honestly, a pain in the butt from a manageability perspective of, great, so I've got this, it's free, I bought it, whatever the case may be. I don't know when there's updates. I'm not out constantly checking your website, and the BES administrator's probably got something better to do on a day to check that sort of thing, right? So you may be out of sync with, say, an RSA application or a secure token or whatever it is, right? So that's BES. That's kind of the way it is. You need to have those files. You package it. If there's another upgrade, you do one of two things. You either overwrite them in the current software configuration, or you build a new one and say it's version 2. And you can only install version 2 if they had version 1. It's the same group of people that have this. It'll go out and install it and rip the other one out, right, as an example. BDS has a little more flexibility. And the reason I'm kind of going backwards again is this has been our building blocks. And this will answer your question for UDS. So sorry, it's going to be a little long-winded here. So what BDS gives you the capability of is owning the bar file or pointing to App World. So I can simply create my software configuration and say, well, it's over here. Right? So we've come into agreement with vendor X or whatever, or you know what? Your App World, you're going to have to use your PayPal or your credit card as an enterprise, and guess what? We'll reimburse you, as an example. Is that the perfect world or the utopia? No. What most large organizations do is they'll acquire it, buy a site license, bring the files in-house. But for those that are free and they say, you know what, we're going to support Texas Hold'em, as an example, but we're going to put it out there as a perk for our employees, they'll actually just point to the URL that you would see when you bring your browser up for an App World app with the question mark and then I think it's a 4-digit number, tells you what app it is. And then they build their software configuration for it. And then Bez is smart enough to go get the files and install them on your Playbook or what will be your BlackBerry 10 device. So building on that, with UDS, when you build your software catalog, not a configuration, for some reason we called it something different, you can point to either App Store or App Market, and it'll go out and get those files and allow the download to take place. And it's actually the device doing that. It's not us pushing it out, because remember, there's no push in UDS. All we're doing is referencing that to build the catalog to say, hey, this is one of your apps. So I tried to come back full circle to give you that answer. Okay? Yeah. Does that kind of talk about them? I'm going to go a little more detailed, but that kind of at a high level, those are your 4 options today. With the different platforms. I don't envision them changing, other than this one, especially this one, won't be used, as we move forward with Playbooks and BlackBerry 10. That's just not a capability, for that. So USB, we talked about that, right? So hey, you got to have your files locally, network drive, something. I've got to use Java Loader in order to install it, or I've got to use, in the case of Playbook devices, I've got to use BBWP, part of the SDK, in order to do that, or BlackBerry Deploy, whatever the flavor was as we move forward with the SDKs at the time to get it on there. So it's more just for testing and so on, and that's the capabilities. Right? OTA, that was kind of a unique thing that really separated us, and a lot of customers used it, especially those that really didn't want to dive into pre-BlackBerry Enterprise Server version 5. That was just, quite honestly, not the greatest implementation of doing software management. You either had to take an application-centric approach, or you had to take a person-centric approach. And you couldn't make them meet, and doing versioning was just, to be honest with you, a pain in the butt. And everybody knew it, and when we went to 5, they're like, oh, finally, type thing. So OTA was a really good way. Some companies built their own deployment using OTA. So they built their own web pages, they built a front-end component, they know who was downloading what, when, where, all of those things. Here's your catalog. Based on, say, your Active Directory credentials, when you authenticated, you would see a list of this versus this. It took all those, what's the word I'm looking for, capabilities or necessities from the administrator, took it out of their hands and put it into the software folks. So the poor Bez guy wasn't trying to maintain, this version of this and this version of this and this. Oh, you want an update? I got to rebuild it. I got to repackage it. So that's why we've slowly evolved from what we used to have in the old versions of Bez to Bez 5 to BDS and so on. So you've seen kind of an evolutionary step there, from a deployment. So OTA still works. There's a lot of large banks that do that today, but it is moving backwards, as far as being supported per se in the new platforms and so on. So then we have App World, which is the public-facing component. And then as we heard today and saw, where you've got the capabilities of using App World itself on the device. And you have the corporate catalog, which has the capabilities of taking the information that I've built in a software configuration and seeing what's necessary for work versus, yeah, here's all my world, or what I've installed as games and personal components and all those types of things. So App World is still a big piece of it, and will continue to, but its sources will be kind of twofold. One of them is the public-facing piece, and the other part is behind the enterprise. And that's really using your software configurations to build a catalog of your enterprise applications that are exposed when I go to the Work tab today on a BlackBerry, or a Playbook, I'm sorry, and then ultimately when you're in the Work perimeter of a BB10 device, which you saw some things today where they would drag down, see the two tabs. When I clicked here, my App World experience was completely different than my App World experience for my personal device. So I don't think I need to say much. I mean, they're, pretty much the stores are all the same. You go out, you buy something, you download it, you got the capability. I've got, in the case of our application, I have the capability of having My World, so I know what's installed, what's not installed. Do I want to reinstall it if I have a new device? Are there upgrades? That type of thing with the little splat, so I know what's there. That continues to move forward as we go from the current Java-based devices to Playbook to BB10. So that same experience as we move forward. And then we have managed. So I talked about pushed, right, with the caveat that pushed is BES and BDS only. It is not a push in the truest sense when we're using UDS. That is more of a pull from the user's perspective. From our managed on the BES, right, we have automatic detection. So should my device get wiped, or I get a new device, or potentially they delete the application, the BES will automatically try and put it back on if it's supposed to. So that's that manageability capability that's there. We have the ability to do it all over the air. So, BES just does it. It's kind of a set it and forget it type thing, the Ron Popeil methodology, where it's just going to get there, the confirmation behind the scenes. If there's been an issue, you being the BES administrator, if there was any problem installing it, whether there were problems with dependencies, device OS, device type. Let's just say you've got an app that's only good for a 7.1 device, and you inadvertently put Jeff in there in that group that's supposed to get that, and Jeff has a 7.0 device. It will block it, and you'll know, looking at the console, that, hey, Jeff didn't get that app, and here's the reason why. Big strides from where we used to be. And then we're continuing to evolve that also into the UDS experience as well. Hey, he hasn't, or he has downloaded, that type of thing. Dependencies I talked about in no user intervention. From a BDS, same thing again, pushed, pulled from the BlackBerry or the BlackBerry 10 or the Playbook. So you can have the user go out and use the App World and see the optional apps and pull them down, or you can still push mandatory. You can actually push optional. So you can get it there first, and if the guy doesn't like it, he can delete it. You're none the wiser, you being an administrator, but you at least put it there as kind of a preemptive thing for him to say, hey, we'll put these on for you. If you don't want them, you can take them off. It's no big deal. But it's still there in the catalog if you want to come back and get them. Integration with App World, as I talked about, so that's kind of the user's look and feel. That's their way to look into things. So continuing with that consistency as to how we want to present things from a user's perspective and a back end. Detection again, so if the device is wiped, if I get a new device, the capability is there to push it. The cool thing is when we get to BDS, it's no longer a one device per user centric approach, which is what BES is. So that was the reason you couldn't have two BlackBerries or so on, was way back we had the approach that in the early days there never would be a need because there is only one device. That was the limitation of it. BDS is not that. You could have multiple devices all hitting the same thing, and all those devices, based on if I'm in a group, would get all the same applications or would be eligible for all the same applications if they're optional. Again, it's over the air, it's seamless, it's no user intervention. And you can also set up dependencies to say, this app can't go unless this person has this. So this is kind of a little more of a graphical representation of maybe what was shown this morning with respect to having mandatory apps, whether they're pushed or so on. So the blue up here shows that, and this is kind of fuzzy, I apologize, but in the My World, under my corporate, I would see where these would be mandatory, and I can't delete them. So when I try and go over, I don't have a delete button. There's just no way that's coming off the device. So you've got the capability to push something out and say, sorry, we want you to have the expense account, the expense this, whatever, right? And then optional, I would see the same as what I see here, which is I see a delete button or an install button. So just because it's in my catalog, I may or may not have the thing installed on my device. I can choose whether to put it on or take it off. Again, all using the App World application on the device to give you that consistent look and feel as a user this is where I go to manage my applications versus, kind of the older days of an older BlackBerry or, a new 7.1, which did implement the App World pieces as well. Sorry. Oh, one thing I did want to note is the group or user. I want to stress that. So we continued that with BDS as well. And we'll be doing the same thing for UDS. So you'll be able to group users and say they all get, the Salesforce.com, and these people get this. And oh, by the way, these two groups can be in a higher group, and then it ensures that those two applications go to those. So the cool thing there is you don't have to necessarily manage at the user level, which is a big step forward from where we used to be. UDS again, so remember there is a client app. It is a pull, so the user needs to go out. There is the nag message, which I talked about. And then those are those three things that I talked about. So if they exceed the threshold, if you've set one, there's your three options, or do nothing. So there's really four options, right? Do nothing, or these three here. Untrust, unmanage, and wipe. Probably wipe is your most like, I'm not sure why I'd want to do it, but it gives you the capability of doing that. And reset it back to, kind of the factory default. Again, list of optional applications. It looks the same as the list of mandatory, except for one says mandatory beside it. The rest say optional, but you still need to do a pull. Whether the user chooses to go in through a nag message or whether they've gone in from the first notification to say, hey, application XYZ is now available for you, please go download it. And this is another cool one, which is what we're, oops, I'm really jamming through there. Apologize. Right. So if the user departs, automatically, if they break away from ActiveSync, the minute that that's happened, they're no longer managed, all the apps can be blown away from the device. Again, it's a policy. Some of them, yeah, whatever, I don't care. Maybe it's some corporate funnies or something like that. But you've got the capability to say, no, sorry. Anything we've put there or you've put by virtue of us managing that device will immediately be deleted off of the device. And again, OTA, right, off of it, groups and individuals. So I really come to kind of my last slide, to be honest with you. So what do you as a developer do? I've got this. I've answered my questions. I know what the platform provides for me. I know what it adds. I know the value it adds. What do I do? Well, to be honest with you, in all of these steps, you're really giving your file to someone else. You're not having to deal with RIM. You're not having to work through some implementation process yourself. You simply need to seek out the person who manages your implementation of that managed device from a BlackBerry perspective. Obviously, this is only from a RIM perspective, not a good technology or anything else. But you simply take them and put them in the appropriate packaging. Most cases, it's a zip file, and they're deployed. You tell them who gets it or what. If you're working through, I guess I would call it a line of business, somewhere you know that this is your audience for this application. You need to work with, I'll call it your BlackBerry administrator for one of those three tools, the universal device, the BlackBerry device, or the BES, and they make it happen for you. And I'm sure you've seen some of that when you build those software configurations. Right? So either you're doing it or someone else is doing it. But it is a manual process. It's not tedious anymore by any means. And then once it's built, it's managed for these three here. This here is more you put them on a web server, kind of set it and forget it. Yes?
I have a question for you. Suppose we have a managed device, right?
Mm-hmm. So you want to do a blacklist?
Yeah, can we do a blacklist?
Yes.
Without implementing it on the firewall on our server?
You would do the blacklist only if it's one of these three solutions, and it really doesn't apply here, but one of these two, you can do a black.
They would still have the access to different kind of app stores, right? One will be the BlackBerry personal app store, and then there will be a work app store, right?
So to that point, that is using BlackBerry Balance and BlackBerry device. So that would be a Playbook or a BlackBerry 10 device. A current Java-based device, right, doesn't have that connotation of two different app stores.
Right. So I'm basically taking the context of the present scenario, right?
So the current device is in market? Yeah. Right. So you would need to create what's called a blacklist, and that's actually built on the BES or the BlackBerry Enterprise Server. And then you say no to Texan Hold'em, you say no to this, you say no to that. So the blacklist is very specific to define which applications are a no-no. Your other option is to do a whitelist. Anything but these isn't allowed. So there's no generic don't allow, right? It's a reverse concept, so it's actually called a whitelist. So you would say these 5 applications are legal, allowed. Anything else can't be installed. That's done and managed on the BlackBerry server, not on the device.
All right. And if the employee leaves, you just have to decide that the device works. That's it. So everything is set.
If the employee leaves, it all depends on what your organization does to the device.
All right. Okay. And can the employee have multiple accounts on the device? We allow that so that he can use it for somebody else on one device, multiple accounts?
No, no. So the current Java device is bound by one mailbox from that server, that BlackBerry Enterprise Server. So it's only going to pick mail up from there. You could have all your other Gmail and Hotmail and that type of thing, but the premise and the architecture of BES was one device, one mailbox. We do have some things out there that allow you to do delegation and some things, but it's not, I can have this device and it's shared with 5 people, and it's got 5 different mailboxes depending on who's logged into it. You would actually have to write your own app for that. The native email capabilities don't allow that. So to come back to your question, though, if I have some applications that weren't allowed, whether I chose to blacklist them or I created a whitelist, the user leaves the company. If I don't wipe the device and do a factory reset to it, the user is still bound by those policies. They can't go get any other applications. Right? So, and I'm sure they'll let you know that, especially if it's a BYOD device. They would certainly let you know, sorry, you're not doing this to my device. I want you to reset it. So, and that's a capability you have with either BES or the Java loader executable. You can put it back to a factory, but it wipes everything out. So if they've got pictures and movies and video, or movies and videos are the same thing, but and music, they would need to back those up first, assuming you don't encrypt it, because that's another policy you can do on the device. Once you've got that, then you can issue that command, and it's basically like you just opened it from the box. Right? If you try and set it to what's called a default policy, let's assume you enforce passwords. The poor guy is still going to have a password even after he leaves your company, believe it or not, even though you've said set it to default. You have to actually factory restore it in order to get rid of that. It's kind of one of those gotchas people don't realize. So the person's already left, they're already out the door, and once it's no longer communicating with the BES, you can't do anything more with it. The person would have to know that I can go use the Java loader, a little utility, that I can set this and do it myself. So, but those are the capabilities with the software management.
BES is the only way to do it right now.
Right now, it's BES and BDS. So BDS, unfortunately, we're here for the first part. That's BlackBerry Device Service. That manages our playbooks, and that will manage the BlackBerry 10 devices. And think of it as next generation BES. Everything that BES can do, it does as well, maybe in a little different scenario, but it does it. So managing, whitelisting, blacklisting, those types of things. Some of the things don't fit anymore in the paradigm because of the way AppWorld has been implemented or BlackBerry Balance has been implemented. You know, what you used to need to do on the BES side, you may not need to do on BDS, so you need to think differently. Yeah. Yes? Mm-hmm. Today, no. Yeah, and that's a huge concern for the federal governments and stuff is, hey, this is not a BYOD device. This is a corporate device, so I need control of the whole thing. That's inherent in BB10. So as I mentioned before, BB10 will be coming back to the playbook. It'll be there. Yeah. And we've had a lot of customers like Canadian federal government, US, you know. I love the device. I love the security. I love this. Yeah, it may not be what my users want, but it's what I like. But I need to control the whole thing. I need to be able to wipe the whole thing if necessary, not just what little piece I've got access to from an enterprise perspective. So, yeah, it's coming. But it's not there, you know, as of, September 2012. Yeah. So that's the kind of the premise. I guess if I do this, a couple of things that I have to put in for links, type thing is mandatory for my presentation. But that's really what it was just to let you know, hey, what the platform, not necessarily how to develop for the enterprise, just what the push gives you, the capability of software management. And the key thing, right, with BES and BDS today, always on, always connected, bidirectional VPN on an outbound initiated port. That's key for your security guys. And then ultimately we're moving towards that with our universal device, which is the ability to manage iOS and Android devices. Yes?
Do we have a BlackBerry Balance sandbox available for deploying the test and stuff?
For which, you mean for an actual device? Yeah. There's no way to implement that unless the device is managed.
That is a managed device.
So if you have BDS, the BlackBerry Device Service, you can use Balance on a Playbook today. You will be able to use it on a BlackBerry 10 device when they're there. And there is the equivalency of Balance on a 7.0 Java device. It doesn't look or feel, it doesn't look like what you would see on a Playbook or a BB10, but behind the scenes, there is a work and a personal, I'll call it perimeter, and the work side can be removed or deleted or whatever without damaging or hurting the personal side, which was something that couldn't be done in previous releases where you wiped it, you wiped the guy's pictures and whatever else, and then, you know, potentially litigation, you know, type thing. So, hey, Chris, what time is it? Oh, I'm done. I am done, so. Oh, no need for that. So I appreciate you coming out for it. So, and then you and I need to get together. I need to specifically get the questions. I'll give you a business card, and then I'll reach out to some folks that will be able to help us out. Okay. So, any other questions? Hopefully this helped you. Yeah. In what respect? Oh, there's nothing you have to apply for. So by virtue of having either the Playbook or a BB10 device on a BlackBerry device service, you will set up the software configuration, and it's immediately exposed to the enterprise catalog. Yeah. But it has to be a managed device. Yeah. That's automatically taken care of. All right. Thanks again. Appreciate it.